Good morning. I'm going to do that again because I was really tempted to do something and then I didn't do it and now I want to do it. They're not going to play the music. You have to imagine the music. Because I wanted to stop.
Sometime I get a hump in my back.
Tonight, Matthew.
Sometime I'm going over here. Sometime get my honey come back. Sometime I'm gonna rap back Jack.
Tonight, Matthew, I will be Cher. So tempted. That's wasted a minute already. Keep going, Ferguson. So I was looking around for a title for this presentation, and the thing that struck me the most is we tend to talk about Internet of Things, Internet of Everything as being something which is our future, our near future, but certainly something which is not here yet. And that's absolutely not the case. In fact, it's an older idea than you think. I wanted to do some research and kind of look back and think, when did this idea of an Internet of Things, an interconnected Internet of Everything really begin? And the oldest reference I could find was this interview in 1926 with Nikola Tesla. And I highlighted the bits that really stood out to me when I found this quote. And he's basically describing IoT as it stands today. Innumerable transmitters and receivers. Your daily newspaper being printed wirelessly. I mean, that's basically the subscription model for newspapers now. It's something on your iPad, on your Android device. And domestic management. Heat, light, household mechanics, household security. These are all things that many of us, I hesitate to say benefit from, but at least bought in recent years. So it's an idea that goes back a long way. And it's not just an idea. In fact, even in implementation, we talk about wearable technology like that's today's news, but it's old. It's an old thing. The oldest wearable computer dates back to 1955. This was a computer developed by a guy called Edward Thorpe, who was a mathematician, and one of his hobbies as a mathematician was to study the maths and probabilities behind gambling. He wrote a book called How to Beat the Dealer about blackjack, which was so successful they had to change the rules of blackjack because of his book. And then he went on to develop the first wearable computer, and the purpose of this computer was to improve your odds of winning at roulette. Because roulette obviously is a game of complete chance, but actually if you can apply a little bit of science to it, you can increase your odds. So this was like a two-part solution. You'd have the wearable computer, and you'd have a sensor in your shoe. And it was one person's job to stand at the roulette wheel, watch when the ball was dropped into the wheel, and whenever it passed a certain point on the wheel, they would click the sensor in the shoe. So they're timing the progress of the ball and the deceleration of the ball to predict where it would drop. And that would then broadcast one of 8 notes into an earpiece worn by somebody else and tell them where to place their bets. And this actually increased their chances of winning by, I think it was 44%. So it actually brought some distinct returns. It was a very secret project, as you can imagine, and there are some horror stories about, and you remember it's the 1950s, it's, the Twilight Zone era, about the guy with the earpiece standing at the roulette wheel, and he sees the woman next to him looking at him in horror because he's got this wire suddenly poking out of the side of his head, and she doesn't quite know what's going on. It's a very interesting development phase. The other thing that gets a lot of coverage and interest, heads-up displays. I mean, when Google Glass was a thing, it was completely new and innovative, and then it was followed closely by more AR, and now we're seeing the emergence of relatively affordable VR. I think the most affordable is when you actually have the frame and you put your mobile device in the frame, and that acts as the VR headset. But I don't know about you, I don't want to strap an exploding telephone to my face. But this has a pedigree too. This goes all the way back to 1967. This guy, Hugh Upton, worked at Bell Labs, and he had a problem. He's actually, in this image that you're looking at right now, he's wearing his heads-up display, his prototype. He had a problem. He was hard of hearing, so he relied quite significantly on lip reading. But there are certain difficulties with lip reading in that our mouths make very similar shapes for very different sounds. So he developed a 2-part heads-up display solution where he had the microphone embedded in a tie clip, and then in the top corner of one of those lenses, there's a little bevel on the inside with some different colored LEDs. And depending on what sound the microphone was picking up, different combinations of lights would light up in the corner of his vision, so he could make the difference easily between a P and a B, for example. He's the guy who went on to develop the heads-up displays that were used by fighter pilots, but it started out as a hobby project to solve his own issues. So this stuff has a pedigree. Of course, the internet has a pedigree. The internet goes back much further than many of us think. It dates all the way back to ARPANET. I love this story. 10:30 on the 29th of September, 1969, the internet was born, and the first message that was sent over ARPANET was "lo." It sounds kind of biblical. And lo, the internet was born. Problem is, that was actually only half a command, but the computer that was sending the login command crashed halfway through. So the message that was sent was "lo," and 1 hour later, when they'd recovered from the crash, the first login over ARPANET occurred. But the first message that was sent was "lo." So that's how far back it goes, and there's a continuum of development from then to now and into the future. So what does the future hold? Let's look at what some industry analysts think about the kinds of stuff we'll see in the not-too-far future. By next year, we're looking at more than 3 billion connected devices in use in smart cities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about smart cities in a short while. By 2020, and I think we're beginning to see the development of this now, and I think that date of 2020 will be revised down. Smart agents will be facilitating our interactions, but not only with mobile devices, but our interactions with data. What do we mean by smart agents? Things like Google Now, Siri, Alexa from Amazon. How many people in the room have an Alexa-type device in their house, out of interest? I can see a couple of hands up. Go home and ask Alexa to open the pod bay doors. It's one of my favorite commands. If you've seen 2001, you'll know what the answer is. She actually says, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that." True story. And we'll begin to see what's called the post-app era. Because I'm sure you remember our interactions with information, particularly online information, not too long ago were 100% dominated by browsers. If you wanted to interact with anything, you had to go through the browser first to get there. That era already disappeared. And we tend not to use browsers as much as we use apps now. Apps tend to dominate how we interact with information. And the apps are being sidelined and replaced by smart agents and chatbots. The rise of the chatbot is already upon us. There are organizations using chatbots, for example, within Facebook. I was talking to the folks from Skyscanner up in Edinburgh last year about their development of a chatbot for use on Facebook, so you can start a text chat with the Skyscanner app, a Skyscanner bot, and say, "Hey, find me the cheapest flight on a Wednesday next week from Edinburgh to London," and they'll actually interact with you in chat format rather than you having to click through a database and find the right results. And we're talking about trillions of dollars, not only in value to the economy and in turnover from these new startups and companies developing products and services, but also in savings. Savings for consumers, savings for businesses, and even savings for nations and governments. That's the Smart City Initiative. So absolutely trillions of dollars added and subtracted from the economy. And the Gartner estimate for the number of connected devices by 2020 currently stands at 30 billion. But these figures are changed and adjusted so often. I think the only realistic conclusion you can come to is no one knows how many devices we're going to see by 2020. But the growth is absolutely exponential. And from personal experience, it's kind of like Pringles. It's like once you pop, you can't stop. So I got Alexa because I just wanted someone to talk to. But then I discovered Alexa could do loads of things that my Alexa couldn't do because I hadn't bought a lot of other things. So then I bought a Samsung SmartThings hub, and then I bought a Philips Hue hub, and now I can get Alexa to unlock the door and turn the lights on and change the color of the lights in the bathroom. And it's once you pop, you can't stop, and you begin adding and combining these things. And that leads to, the development of your own personal smart home, your own smart bubble that you start to live in. So what makes these things smart? What are the defining characteristics of a thing for it to actually be considered smart? I would argue it's very simple. The ability to collect, to process, and to transmit data. If a thing can do those, to collect, to process, and to transmit data, it'll fall into the smart category. And it's in consumer land predominantly where most of us are encountering these things, but let's not forget that we're already surrounded by smart industry. If you're as sad as me, I live out in the countryside. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing is watching farming documentaries. No shit. And it's amazing the amount of technology which is embedded, for example, in the agriculture industry right now. Soil acidity sensors, weather devices, wind sensors, health sensors for the acidity of the milk from your dairy herd, feeding sensors, RFID, NFC, tags embedded in cattle. This stuff is already part of our supply chain. This information is already being connected. Where we encounter it tends to be in our home, in the bubble that we build around ourselves. And for me, the concern when it comes to security is not so much that we have all of these devices and they're capable of collecting, processing, and transmitting data. It's the fact that we want to join all of these devices together and we want to automate them and we want them to allow to make autonomous decisions based on the data they collect and share between them. So your smart home of today could easily be doing things like, when the sun comes up, open the blinds and make sure the lights are turned off. Just in case I left home and left some lights turned on, so save my energy. When the sun comes up, open the blinds, turn the lights off. When I get a telephone call, make sure you mute the TV and flash the lights in whichever room I'm in, because I might not hear the telephone. You can begin to automate these kinds of activities. But there's also potential for compromise there. If you've got a system that based on external data is doing something like opening the security blinds around your windows in your house, what data is causing that activity? Well, logically you'd have to say it's luminescence. When it's bright enough outside, the sun's come up, so I'm going to open the blinds. So if I want to get through your hardware security, is the only thing I need a really powerful torch to shine at your light sensors and then your blinds just open for me? There's a potential for compromise that we need to consider. As we begin to bring together our digital lives and our physical lives, we have to take account of the fact that digital risks will have physical consequences. And those things are only amplified when we begin to talk about smart cities. And again, smart cities are not the future. Smart cities are built and being built right now. 250 million Chinese are scheduled to live in smart cities this year, rising to 600 million by 2020. Smart cities that are being purpose-built to relocate millions of people from the countryside into an urban and smart environment. There's a town in Spain already which has automated, I say automated, humanized maybe is a better word for this particular example, access to all of their public services through Twitter. So that if you see a public streetlight not working, you tweet the service picks up the fact that this light's not working, they tag the maintenance engineer who will go and fix it, and he'll then tweet back what the problem was and what time it was fixed. If you want to contact the police, you do it through Twitter. If you want to talk to the mayor or take part in a town council, town hall meeting, it's all live streamed through Twitter. And everybody, every service has a Twitter address. And it's all handled through social media. There's no privacy. That town, I think it's pronounced Jun, J-U-N, if you want to look into it. It's an incredible case study of using social media to facilitate access to cities and services. Singapore sees itself as a smart nation, not really a smart city. I guess it's easier when you think about relative sizes. In Singapore, they're focused on transportation and healthcare. For example, you can book your spot on crowdsourced routes for public transport by using an app called Beeline. There are cities in Holland where there are citizen networks of air quality and traffic sensors, which are used to relay real-time information to improve the flow of traffic around the city. In Korea, they have purpose-built international business district, which has real-time video in every home, so you can benefit from going and learning English in real time with a teacher on video, consulting a doctor. They have GPS tracking bracelets for their children. They have ubiquitous smart keys for their homes. Everyone uses a key from the same system to get into their own home. Are you beginning to see the problem here? There's a book, 1984. You know, where the guy talks to his TV and his TV talks to him? We're already there in very, very many ways. The other thing, and actually this is not in the slides, but this occurred to me when I saw the robot talking to you earlier on, and we were talking about collection of information and the many, many ways it can be collected and the amount of information that's available. One of the things that's happening right now, be honest, how many people use Facebook? Yeah, pretty much all of us, right? How many people have seen on Facebook those kind of quiz-type things where it says, we bet we can guess the year you were born if you answer these 10 questions or something like that? That kind of bullshit's everywhere, right, on Facebook. And people do it, right? Otherwise you wouldn't see it. People think, oh, it was brilliant. It guessed I was born in this year, 1822. What really scares me behind that, go out and look for a company called Cambridge Analytica. Now, this is not in my slides. This is just something I've been looking into recently. We talk about manipulation of data and manipulation of opinions and influencing elections and influencing human behavior and the way people act and react. There are already companies out there using tools like Facebook to collect huge amounts of data about all of us. And think, when you go and do that quiz that says, I bet we can guess your age, the app, you're giving it access to your date of birth anyway, your email address, your friends list, and all of the information that's shared by your friends. So these databases are already huge, and with access to that amount of information, and you're telling them about the things you like and the things you don't like, and you're allowing them to build this huge database, they are already creating and delivering news stories biased in one way or another to influence your behavior and make you act and react in a certain way. So think before you share this kind of stuff, because the big question, I was standing there looking across the stage here, and the thing that really jumped out at me when the robot was talking, I started to think, in the future, because he was saying, don't worry, Skynet's not here yet. But in the future, who are the robots going to be? Us or them? Who's going to be doing what they're told? Us or them? That's probably a bigger question than most of the other moral considerations around robotics at the moment, I would argue. So who is responsible for privacy and security in this interconnected internet of stuff right now? Well, right now it's you, me, us, individually. We have to make the calculation between security and convenience or utility. Are we going to get enough benefit from this thing to offset the fact that actually there's a microphone in my house listening to me all day, every day? And actually there's a camera on my TV which is watching me all day, every day. Somebody asked me to think about security scenarios for that kind of thing. I have a connected home security camera as well. Anybody have one of those? Few people. Really handy when you're away, if you know how many things the dogs have destroyed and which one it was. But I was thinking about potential criminal opportunities from that kind of technology in the future. Ransomware is really big right now, right? Affecting your PC, your Mac, encrypting your files and asking for a ransom to give your files back. Just imagine getting a pop-up on your mobile device from the app that controls your connected home security camera that says, we saw what you did in the living room. If you want this footage deleted, that'll be $50, please. Imagine getting ransomware on your TV. You've paid an extra 20 euros to watch the big game tonight. And then suddenly maybe 3 minutes before the game is about to start, ransomware pops up on your smart TV and says, you can't watch this game unless you pay an additional €5. Think of the audience of millions that you could affect with that kind of thing. At the moment, you're responsible, but the truth is, as the grows and expands out into the smart city scenario, you become less responsible. You, in fact, become less enabled, less empowered, because you're then talking about citywide, statewide, nationwide networks of surveillance cameras, of GPS tracking, of NFC and RFID, tracking the things you buy, which shops you buy them from, how you get them home, where you put them in your house, and when they run out, how quickly you use them, just for example, just in a supermarket example. So right now you have responsibility and you have the luxury of choice. But as it expands, that's taken away from you. So the thing that you really need to consider is how can we engineer securely from the ground up these products and services? Because at the moment you don't consider security when you go and buy a connected device. You consider mostly how cool it is and how great that you can have whatever color lights you want. I know someone who, when they watch the Sci-Fi Channel, the lights in the front room go red. And when they watch, I think it's National Geographic, the lights in the front room go green. Just when they change channels. And that's what you think about, the cool stuff. But you've got to consider security. What are the risks? To me, the risks are two distinct things. One is privacy. You can see I spend a lot of time choosing my pictures. One is privacy, and the other is obsolescence. How quickly does something become useless? Does anyone know, by the way, what the thing on your right is? That's a portable microfiche reader. Does anyone remember microfiches? I remember sitting in my dad's office with this big thing and I'm moving the tray around going, wow, this is the future. How wrong I was. But those are the risks. So, privacy, I spoke about it before. You've got, with an Alexa-type device or even with your mobile device, you've got something which is capable of listening all the time. If you've got an Alexa in your house, the microphone is on all the time. Now, obviously, it will only wake up and respond when you say the keyword, which is normally Alexa, but it has to be on all the time to hear the keyword. We've already seen cases where smart TVs have been basically spying on their owners. Companies have already had to apologize for their behavior in that area. So you've got cameras, you've got microphones. The fantastic thing with Donald Trump the other day, God, he was in a restaurant and he was looking at some very sensitive documents, but it was a bit dark because it was a restaurant. So he had 3 or 4 of his security detail behind him, standing there, turning on the torches on their mobile devices so that he could read the paperwork better. What if those devices were compromised? Not only are they now pointing at highly sensitive documents, but they've got fantastic light as well. We don't think about the other capabilities of these devices, and the ability to manage and control them is not exposed to us. And with obsolescence, it's obviously how quickly does something go end of life? How quickly does something go end of support? Or what if the company that you chose to be the coolest one with the best features gets acquired by some other company, maybe a competing one, and they just kill the device that you bought? You have a very expensive paperweight. This stuff really happens. These risks, we have risks from threat actors, we have risks from vulnerabilities, from misconfigurations, extortion. We have external risks like power, weather, infrastructure, regulation, legislation. All of these things will play a part, but we very rarely get to consider them. One of the things where I think attention is kind of misdirected right now when we think about security of devices, as a research community, we tend to focus on the device itself because it's easier and it's more legal. You can go and buy a connected security camera, you can reverse engineer, you can take it apart, you can look for vulnerabilities, and that stuff happens and that's good. But where it's less difficult to do this, less easy to do the security research is at the back end. Now, all of these things do collect and transmit data, but the data usually goes somewhere else. If my Alexa doesn't have an internet connection, she can't do anything. So my queries are being sent to the cloud, to a data center, where they're stored, mined, processed. And that's where the gold is, and that's where the attackers are really going to go. But from a security research perspective, If you don't have permission to go and investigate the security of the back end of these IoT devices, it's illegal to do so. So there's been very little research about how secure the back end of these devices are. And a lot of it's focused on the thing that you wear or the thing that you install. We need to be much more careful as organizations how we secure and protect the servers, the virtual infrastructure, the data, the access within that data center and within that server environment. This stuff is already real. This is a map of one of the moments of the Mirai botnet, the botnet that was used to attack the journalist Brian Krebs, and the botnet that was used to attack DNS and used to attack OVH, the biggest denial of service attack in history so far. The author of this botnet, when he made the source code open source, made it all public, which really expanded the problem, was boasting of having about 380,000 connected devices, and these were IoT devices, not regular PCs. 380,000 compromised digital video recorders, the security cameras mostly, and routers. And these were used to create denial of service attacks in the region of 1.2 terabits per second. No one survives that. And that's just the beginning. If we're talking about 30 billion connected devices in the next couple of years. Real-world failures. Does anyone know what trailer this is they're looking at right now? This is the trailer where someone died. This was the trailer that the driver of the Tesla that was on autopilot crashed into, because the technology within the Tesla vehicle failed to distinguish the white trailer from the sky. So as far as the car was concerned, there was no obstacle. And it went straight in there. Real-world failures. Real-world obsolescence. I shouldn't laugh, but the lock company went out of business and shut the service down. And so anyone who had one of those devices locked at the time when they switched off the service couldn't unlock it until the battery ran out, which was 180 days. That's obsolescence. Those are the risks you take. Revolve was a smart home hub to control lots of other devices from other manufacturers. It got acquired and killed. So your investment's dead. These things are real. These things are happening now, and we don't consider them. So what questions would I leave you with? They're broadly similar. If you're an enterprise, these are the things you've got to consider. How do I identify and manage and monitor devices connecting to my corporate network? And how do I identify the vulnerabilities in those devices? I'm not giving you solutions because, unfortunately, there are very, very few of them right now. But you've got to look at what technology do you have access to that will begin to facilitate the identification and management, not only of the devices, but the vulnerabilities within those devices. Access, hopefully, is a more simple question to answer in an enterprise environment, but you've got to take into account that you've got other unmanaged devices on your network. What are the new vectors of data loss or data leakage or data theft that arise through these devices? What can a camera do with information, and how can you mitigate against that? Maybe you've got it all locked down so no one can save any of those documents. They can only read them and then close them again. But if there's a camera in their glasses, then they can save the information. How do you mitigate against that, for example? Legal and regulatory compliance. I know one of the people on the panel with me in the session after this will be able to speak to that very well, but we've got GDPR coming up. That's going to make a big difference globally. GDPR is a regulation across the EU, but also for anyone doing business into the EU. So it's a global regulation. How do you maintain compliance in an IoT world? And how do I, as I said before, secure that huge volume of data that's being collected and mined by all of these devices? In the home, the questions are very similar. That's why you didn't see much change between the two slides. You still have to be able to find out what's connected. How many of you have a means of finding out what and who is connected to your home network? Very few of us. Very few of us have this kind of technology. There's been no interest from consumers before. You better start getting interested. And all the other things that we've already spoken about, but then the things with obsolescence. If this goes out of business, how easily can I migrate? How can I get my data out of there in a format that I can use and put it into there? How can I migrate? How portable is all the stuff that I've invested my time and effort in? And importantly, How can I understand what's under the hood of this black box that I just installed in my house? How do I know what vulnerable software is in there? And how can I mitigate against those vulnerabilities? And how do we message that to people who don't give a shit about what's under the hood? How do we engage the wider community in an effort to begin to demand security of the vendor? How do we have something like a security kite mark on a product that people can begin to trust that says this was built securely? And if you're a manufacturer, I guess the main question for you is, help? If your priority is building business, creating a market, having the best product first, being first to market, security is the last consideration that you have. So you want someone else to be able to step in and give you an SDK, give you a software development kit, or give you some advice, or give you something that will automate, enable, and simplify the building in of security into that infrastructure and that device. There are a lot of questions to answer. We're only at the beginning of this process. But we collectively are the architects of our own future. And we owe it to ourselves to make sure that future is as secure as it can be. Thank you very much.